John and Emily Davis were just an ordinary retired couple when they first boarded the Ocean Serenity. It was meant to be a celebratory 2-week vacation after decades of hard work, but something about life aboard the ship felt different. Free from the mundane stresses of life on land, the couple realized they had found the perfect escape. Unbeknownst to anyone, they began plotting a way to stay longer than their initial itinerary. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. Initially, they thought about extending their trip for a few more days, but a simple extension turned into something more. They began making subtle arrangements, ensuring their presence went unnoticed. While most passengers disembarked at the end of their cruise, John and Emily remained. They carefully avoided drawing attention, switching cabins, and blending in with new groups of passengers. Soon, weeks turned into months, and they began crafting a long-term plan. John and Emily's secret life aboard the ship required careful planning. They developed routines that mimicked the habits of other passengers to avoid suspicion. They ate at different restaurants, attended shows sporadically, and even made friends with other travelers, only to say goodbye as if they were leaving too. They avoided the crew's gaze, making sure to stay low-key. Their daily life became a series of careful decisions, ensuring they would not stand out. The couple became masters of blending in. Emily would chat with tourists about their next destination, while John would casually ask about their adventures. They played the part so convincingly that no one ever suspected they had been on the ship far longer than anyone else. They would disembark at ports and reboard like other passengers, mingling with new groups each time. Every day felt like a new vacation. Yet, they never left. While on board, John and Emily became friendly with other passengers, but never allowed anyone to get too close. They'd share drinks, exchange stories, and even laugh with new friends, but their mysterious longevity was never revealed. They became experts at listening rather than talking about themselves. Whenever someone asked how long they'd been aboard, they'd smile and shrug, offering vague answers about extended vacations or retirement dreams. John and Emily knew staying in one place would make them noticeable, so they switched cabins regularly, moving their belongings every few weeks. They'd sometimes request upgrades, other times downgrade to more modest rooms. The key to their survival was remaining anonymous, ensuring no one questioned their extended presence. To the crew, they seemed like regular passengers enjoying a leisurely trip, constantly moving between staterooms, making them difficult to track. Over time, John and Emily honed the art of invisibility. They had attended fewer ship-sponsored activities, opting instead for quieter corners of the vessel where they could go unnoticed. They spent hours on deck reading or sipping tea in less popular cafes. At night, they would walk the quiet hallways, admiring the ocean under the stars. They became ghosts on the Ocean Serenity, rarely interacting with the crew and always staying out of sight. Despite their careful planning, John and Emily couldn't avoid every encounter with the staff. The occasional familiar face in the dining room or at the bar led them to grow more cautious. They changed their eating habits and frequented different lounges, always conscious of the eyes around them. The couple's routine became a delicate balancing act, one that required constant attention. They knew their secret wouldn't last forever, but they were determined to keep it going. Their downfall came not from the passengers or the ship's officers, but from an unexpected source: the laundry service. One day, a young laundry cleaner noticed something odd while collecting clothes from John and Emily's cabin. The couple had been using the service regularly, but the cleaner realized they had been aboard for much longer than a typical cruise would allow. Their laundry patterns didn't match up with the usual 2-week turnover of passengers. The cleaner didn't immediately suspect anything nefarious, but something seemed off. She mentioned her observation to a colleague in passing, noting how the couple's laundry kept appearing even as new passengers cycled through. Words spread quietly among the lower ranks of the ship's staff. Conversations over dinner breaks began to focus on John and Emily, with workers wondering if the couple were stowaways or part of some strange unsolved mystery. As whispers among the crew grew louder, More staff members began keeping an eye on John and Emily. The waiters noticed they had been dining for months without ever leaving, and the entertainment staff recognized their faces from shows spanning many voyages. Curiosity turned to suspicion, and soon the couple was under quiet surveillance. Still, John and Emily remained oblivious, continuing their routine as they always had, unaware that their secret was unraveling. It didn't take long for the crew to connect the dots. One officer began reviewing passenger records and noticed the couple had never officially disembarked. Their names weren't on any recent passenger manifests, yet they still occupied a cabin. The officer quietly brought the matter to the attention of his superiors. What started as an innocent observation by a laundry cleaner had turned into a full-blown investigation into how the couple had managed to stay undetected. One evening, John and Emily were called to the ship's office. They had been expecting this moment for some time, but when it finally came, it still caught them off guard. The captain and a few officers sat them down, explaining that the crew had noticed their prolonged presence. The couple was calm, knowing that their decade-long journey might be coming to an end. They had prepared for this, but it still stung to face the truth. When asked how long they had been aboard, John and Emily shared their story. They hadn't planned to stay forever, but 1 year had turned into 2, and 2 into 10. Life on the ship had become their reality, a never-ending vacation where they didn't have to worry about bills, medical appointments, or family obligations. The captain listened with a mix of disbelief and amusement as they explained how they had survived unnoticed for so long. The captain found himself in a difficult position. On the one hand, John and Emily had broken no laws by staying aboard, though they had exploited a loophole in the ship's system. On the other hand, their continued presence posed a logistical challenge. How had they avoided detection for so long? The captain realized that this wasn't just a matter of evicting 2 passengers. It was about preventing something like this from happening again. After much deliberation, the captain decided to handle the situation quietly rather than causing a public scandal or alerting the authorities. He offered John and Emily a deal. They could stay until the end of the current voyage, but after that, they would need to disembark and leave the ocean Serenity. John and Emily agreed, though the reality of their departure weighed heavily on them. Their decade-long adventure was finally coming to a close. For the remaining weeks of their final voyage, John and Emily soaked in every moment. They revisited their favorite spots on the ship, from the quiet reading corner in the library to the secluded deck where they had spent countless evenings watching the sunset. Every meal, every walk along the promenade felt like a farewell to the life they had known for the past decade. It was bittersweet, but they knew it couldn't last forever. As their final days aboard the ocean Serenity approached, John and Emily quietly bid farewell to the crew. No longer invisible, they had become part of the ship's lore. On their last night, they sat on their balcony, watching the moonlight shimmer on the water, reflecting on their years at sea. It had been an adventure of freedom and tranquility, but now it was time to return to the real world. The morning of their disembarkation was quiet and somber. As the ship docked, they packed for the last time, walking hand in hand down the gangway. The solid ground beneath their feet felt unfamiliar after a decade at sea. Without a clear plan for what lay ahead, they knew only that a new chapter awaited them. Returning to land was overwhelming. The bustling pace of life, the noise, and the absence of the ship's familiar rhythm made them feel out of place. They had sold their home long ago, assuming their travels would be brief. Now, finding a place to settle seemed daunting. Every location felt too still, lacking the endless freedom of the ocean. The world had changed in their absence. Technology had advanced, leaving them struggling to adapt. They attended workshops to learn about smartphones and apps, but the digital world felt foreign. Reconnecting with old friends was bittersweet. Many had moved on, and some were gone. Though they tried to rebuild relationships, their decade-long absence had created a distance that couldn't be easily bridged. Despite their efforts to adjust, the ocean's call remained strong. They often visited marinas, watching cruise ships depart. longing for the life they had left behind. A year later, they booked a short cruise to revisit the ocean Serenity. Walking its decks felt like greeting an old friend. Though the crew had changed, the ship remained familiar, stirring memories of their hidden life aboard. Realizing their love for cruising hadn't faded, John and Emily began planning new adventures. They embarked on voyages to different parts of the world, embracing the freedom of the sea once more. Fellow travelers, fascinated by their story, often joked about trying the same. John and Emily laughed, knowing the secrecy and planning it had required. As they grew older, they reflected on their unusual adventure, wondering if anyone else would attempt what they had done. The world had become more connected, making such a feat unlikely. Still, they took pride in their daring past, knowing they had lived a life few could imagine, a life filled with adventure, freedom, and stories they would carry forever. During one of their return voyages, John and Emily received a surprise visit from the ship's captain. Their decade-long stay had become a legend, and the captain was eager to meet them. Over drinks in his quarters, they reminisce about their time aboard, the close calls, and the quiet adventure they had lived. As they continued to cruise, they became well known among travelers. Passengers sought their advice on long-term travel, and though they shared tips, they kept the full story of their hidden life aboard to themselves. However, time was catching up with them. Long voyages became exhausting, and they began opting for shorter trips, knowing they would travel for as long as they could. After years of smaller cruises, they decided on one final grand voyage, a world cruise spanning all 7 continents. Every stop felt like a celebration of their adventurous life. As the journey ended, they stood on the deck, watching the horizon one last time. The sea had been their home, their escape. Now, with peace in their hearts, they knew it was time to slow down. They settled in a quiet coastal town, finding comfort in a small cottage by the water. It wasn't the same as the ocean Serenity, but the ocean breeze and distant waves kept them connected to the life they had loved. Their story became a legend among cruisers, passed down and embellished with each retelling. Former crew members occasionally visited, sharing laughter over old memories. John and Emily cherished these visits, knowing they had left a lasting mark on those who had shared their secret. Over time, they embraced the simple joys of daily life. Walks along the shore, morning coffee, and the peaceful rhythm of a life well lived. One evening, as the sun set over the water, Emily turned to John with a smile. "We did it," she whispered. John squeezed her hand, knowing exactly what she meant. Their story was one of adventure, love, and freedom. A life lived entirely on their own terms.